Right, good afternoon, and thank you everyone. I think we've got some good attendance, which is good. Now, we heard from Warwick this morning how lucky we are being in Vietnam with strong GDP growth, and although some headwinds, I think we're much better off than a lot of other markets in the region. But in spite of that, we're all still facing these cost pressures. And CEOs and CMOs and sales directors, everybody is looking within their organizations at how they can cut costs, given margin pressures, and how they can improve ROI. And I think all of us are facing those challenges. Hands up, anyone who thinks they've got enough marketing budget. Not many. Okay, so we would all like more marketing budget, or we would like our marketing budgets to work harder. And really that's what we want to talk about today, is how do we either increase the effectiveness and ROI of our marketing, or we're going to have to face the prospect of having those budgets cut. So, without further ado, I will kick this off, perhaps asking Avik to talk a little bit about, from a Kimberly-Clark perspective, what do you think some of the challenges are that you're facing, and advice that you might give to some of the marketeers in the room on improving ROI?
First, like to be like we can gonna place. Lester, we discuss things about business a lot, and it's just a natural continuation of what we do on a more regular basis. Yeah, so I think that's one of our, as marketeers, that's one of our main issues that we face, right? So we all know they're going up. Invariably, what it leads to is that money for marketing activities or as ATL activities keeps getting squeezed. In fact, it always feels like anything goes wrong, the first thing that so the first thing that kind of gets squeezed, or the first thing that gets questioned, is what are you doing on ATL? How do you get better bang for the buck in terms of the ATL work that you're doing, right? So obviously we are no different. We are facing the same pressures. We are tackling the same challenges. One of the first things we do, and we started doing, is to look at all activities together in terms of ROI, in terms of how do it's not just ATL, how do you look at ATL plus BTL together, and kind of line them all up together to say what is really working better, what is not working as well. It is not just about one touch point, but put everything together to look at what is working, what is not. The second, and I think this is almost counterintuitive, right? In terms of ATL, I think the biggest realization I've had, and we've had, a lot of us, is it is better to invest more in quality than in quantity. So it sounds pretty easy, but I think the key focus is that you invest behind creating communication, creating content that actually is more usable. And that is, I think, proven over time. If you produce content or creative that is better, that delivers better ROI, it is not just better ROI now, it is actually more reusable going ahead. So some of the conversations actually on how do you make sure that even with these pressures, how do you keep delivering the business requirement, is around how do you make your creative work, how do you make your communication actually work harder and longer. So those are the things we're doing. Even in fact, I know there are a few companies here which work on reusing or re-editing old communication material on brands, reworking them together to actually design new content, right? And that's an industry that got a huge boost during COVID as well, when people could not shoot new content. So those are one of the channels to look at. How do you actually maximize your effectiveness even with a limited budget? And those are some of the things we're doing.
And as an agency person, should I encourage reusing content? I mean, I would argue, yes. I mean, I think COVID did teach us that opportunity. And there are certainly some categories, I mean, like with Huggies, where you have new mums constantly entering the market. The issues of wear out are perhaps less relevant in that category. Infant milk formula, diapers, that sort of thing. What other things are you looking at to try and improve ROI?
In addition, I think, like I said, look at the touch points. Effective, be brutal in terms of cutting down the number of touch points, investing more on fewer touch points, uh, improving the quality of content and using it more. And the last is obviously, and like we keep speaking, use judgment as to what are the few touch points and are the few interventions that you need to move the consumer. There is always going to be a lot of data available, but it's important for us as marketeers, as business leaders to actually apply judgment that what is that is really critical and what you need to invest behind. Obviously, there's no silver bullet, but as we go ahead, we keep trying things and we learn.
I mean, I like that idea of using our judgment. I think quite a David Ogilvy used to say, some people use research like a drunk uses a lamppost for support rather than illumination. And I think one of the things I would encourage all of us is to use our judgment a lot more than we do. Yes, research is important, but as marketeers, we have to make the call. Research isn't always going to give you the answer. But with all the data we've got lots of inputs. Phil, how are you helping people with ROI modeling, which a lot of people.
But before we get into that, I've got a question for Avik. I think,
Okay,
if I heard him
on.
correctly, anyway, I just want to clarify. Did you say that you're investing more in fewer touch points? Because my point, building on that, is like in this day and age, there are so many touch points within so many different platforms and media, digital and outside as well, that if you're investing in fewer touch points, how do you go about knowing which ones work and which ones don't work? There's so many of them.
Yeah, so I think it's once you try out something and you know whether it works or not, you take the call to reduce touch points. And again, goes back to your understanding of the consumer, that what you feel really moves. And there are touch points which are not exclusive. They play the same role in the consumer journey. So can you leave out one touch point for the other? Of course, there's always going to be, I think, a 90-10 principle where you do 90% or invest 90% of your time and money behind things you're really sure of, and about 10 to 20% of your money and time behind things you're experimenting. So it's that balance. You will always park aside some amount of your time and money for experimenting, but you need to spend 80 to 90% of things you're really sure about.
Okay. And that belief you have in fewer, bigger, better probably sums up that approach to not trying to do too many things, but focusing much more on a few things, doing them really well and doing them bigger. Yeah. Okay.
You have to ask me the question again, I forgot.
So, Phil, if optimizing ROI is really important for people, how are you helping clients get after this? Because it's a complicated area.
All right. Can I go back in time somewhat, first of all, and I'll build into it rather than answer it directly. So Soames was born in the days when media was very, very straightforward. There was something called terrestrial TV. Remember that?
Yeah.
Does anybody watch TV, terrestrial TV? Probably not many of you anymore. You had something called print, which nobody reads anymore.
Shelf wobblers.
What's that? Oh yeah, I can guess what it is. Yeah. Outdoor, and that was pretty much it. Right?
Radio.
Oh, radio. Yeah, okay. That's a small media in Vietnam. So in the older days, not saying that Soames is old, he's not. He's still young. Then actually measuring the ROI on those medias was actually relatively straightforward. There's something called, I think you'll all be aware of something you've heard a lot called marketing mix modeling, MMM. It was invented in 1949 by economists, and it's still used today, and it's still used pretty heavily by quite a lot of advertisers and clients of mine. But it's still got its validity. But the issue with this these days is the fact that it's based on a kind of statistical analysis called linear regression. And it means that you need back data going back over 3 years and can only take into consideration a very small number of touch points. So it doesn't, Okay, it tells a partial story if you employ it today, but it doesn't show the whole picture. The other disadvantage of it as well is it doesn't really take in consideration something that everybody here is trying to do today, which is build big brands. So when the digital age came around, then something called attribution or multi-touch point attribution became all the rave. And it's still used heavily today. And it's definitely an enhancement upon just doing marketing mix modeling, but that's facing a number of challenges. The first thing is that it's best suited when you've got these things called cookies. And let's say with the restrictions on data privacy that was outlined by Rohit in the first session this morning, it means that getting access to such data is going to become increasingly prohibitive. So that's not necessarily going to be the full answer moving forward. The other thing about this as well, about multi-touchpoint attribution, is the fact that it makes you focus more on the short-term behavior of converting an action in the digital space. The other disadvantage, of course, is it generally can only take in consideration what's going on in the digital arena that can be measured by cookies. And clearly, as segue to Leicester later on, there's a lot more involved than just pure digital media. You've got to convert people at point of sale as well. And lo and behold, there are still some people, not in this room, who still watch terrestrial TV as well. So even though that's being relatively recent in the last 10 years or so, it really only shows the partial picture. So the new thing that I'm building to and the way that it should be done in terms of measuring ROI is something that is, there's all kinds of technical names for it, but I'll keep it simple: holistic marketing measurement. So what this, without going into the technical detail, except that it involves a statistical technique called Bayesian hierarchies, and that's as technical as I will get. You've heard of it? No, okay. Well, anybody who studies statistics would know about it. And this is, it uses all kinds of techniques, and also it's able to incorporate AI technologies as well, and it's able to incorporate the best of marketing mix measurement, the best of attribution as well. And its strength is that it brings everything together, whether it's anything that's below the line, above the line, whether it's digital or it's not digital. It can also incorporate your brand as well, and the quality of your creative as well. I think I saw in one of the presentations today that creativity contributes about 50% of the performance of communication, the other being like basically the weight of media and the quality of the media. So being able to incorporate creative, and whether creative is strong or not, really enhances the strength of this model. Does that answer the question? I've gone on long enough.
That answers the question. The question it then begs is, if I'm in the audience and I really want to get after this, what advice would you give? How do we take it forward? What do we do next if we want to seriously look into ROI? How can you help? How can people move it forward?
Well, I just explained that the best approach is something called holistic marketing measurement. There's all kinds of different ways you can do it. You can do it as a point-in-time measure. You can do it on a continuous basis. You can do it to predict the future. For example, in my company, we recently purchased a company called Hamilton AI, which of course takes in AI technologies, and it's able to really decompose into small details the contribution of individual media. But if you're asking me for a blatant sales bite,
it was a chance for you to make a plug.
You can speak to me after this session. I'll give you my business card, and my company's got a webinar on the 24th of May, which goes into a lot more detail than what I've just outlined now.
Great. Well, I would encourage you, those interested, certainly try and get to join that webinar. Okay, we've been talking just there largely primarily about the above the line ROI optimization.
But what I just talked about takes in consideration below the line as well.
Yeah.
As long as the data is available, can be incorporated in the model.
Yeah. But, and that's, I think, the big opportunity when it comes to ROI. In a lot of categories, for every dollar a brand will spend above the line, it's spending $2.50 below. And that's the type of delta. So the amount of money that companies are spending on trade incentives, the amount of money they're spending on sampling, on premiums, on promoters, on consumer promotion and activation, huge amounts of money. And for most CEOs, this is a complete black hole. They have got no idea of what the company is spending across the organization, because it normally sits somewhere with sales, somewhere with brand marketing, and sometimes other areas of the organization. So Lester, I want to come to you, because Lester, although he would greatly love to, the idea of coming from a creative background, does not. Lester comes from the world of trade, shopper, and field marketing, and spent many years with companies like Nestle, as well as running the largest field marketing agency in Asia. Lester, tell us a little bit about some of the conversations you're having with clients around that whole BTL ROI optimization.
Thanks, Holmes. Good afternoon, everyone. I think, as Holmes said, I think this, looking at brand activation or shopper marketing, it typically is not on the agenda, and it is this big black hole. And there are many opportunities to actually optimize. One needs to look at effectiveness, and more than just, everybody talks about effectiveness. How many consumers did we reach? How many samples did we give out? How many units did we sell? But very seldom, people are talking about efficiency. At what cost? Looking at the ROI perspective of it. So there's huge opportunities to actually look at your brand activation spend and say, right, where can we improve efficiencies and effectiveness? Ultimately, how can we get more shoppers engaged? How can we sell more units? And how can we actually get better cost values and better cost efficiencies? So, I'll tell you very practically what one should be doing, what we will do to actually say, right, how do you optimize your brand activation and your shopper marketing? And there are various things that one can look at. Firstly, do we have the resources, the structure, the capabilities within the organization to actually manage brand activation effectively? I think Soames mentioned it's very fragmented. You have multiple departments involved when it comes to activating brand activations. You have trade marketing, you have sales, you have the brand teams, and sometimes sampling event teams. And it's messy, it's fragmented. What we've looked at in certain cases, stuff we've done in Nestle in the past, is look at developing a department, a center of excellence within a company that actually manages brand activation across all business units, obviously efficiently and effectively. So that's the first thing. Have you got the capabilities? Do you have the resources to manage it effectively? And secondly, I like talking about agency rationalizations. And I'm sure a lot of you today, I know it happens, we're having multiple brands, multiple agencies involved. You can go to one store, go to a hyper or a super on a weekend, and you could find multiple activations taking place for the same company across multiple categories and brands, but with different agencies. So there's no coordination, there's no synergies, there's no economies of scale. And the biggest thing and the easiest way to actually get optimization is to rationalize your agencies. One should look at the concept, the philosophy of power of one. One store, one agency, managing all your brand activations. And potentially you can add on your merchandisers. So you now have a team which are all jointly KPI'd. They all know each other. It becomes a strong, powerful team working for one agency, from one agency, one set of supervisors, consistent principles across all brands. And you can think, number one, it kind of develops long-term partnerships with agencies. It's not, one doesn't want a vendor relationship. You want a partner of an agency becomes a partner over long term. You get economies of scale. You get long-term qualified ambassadors in the stores. So it's a matter of saying, how do we rationalize? What packages can we put together so we have less agencies? And this could be done by region, by channel. One will never profess to use one agency. Very much it's too risky, and very often the business is too big. But you can package it, utilizing that philosophy one store, one agency, packaged by account, by channel, by region. So that's the second element, which is really important. Thirdly, it's a matter of saying we need to have a brand activation framework. How do we strategically plan brand activations? So optimization of ROI is the key thing that we're looking at all the time. So we look at a model, and there are three elements to the model. The first is what we call the strategy, right? So for any brand activation program that you need to put together, we need to start with data. You need to then go across to segmentation. And from segmentation lead you to deployment, modeling, and formatting. Very easy, sounds very simple, but it's not done. Now, the first thing is to make sure that if we're going to be running brand activation, multiple touch points, multiple stores, that we are doing a segmentation analysis first. It's a matter of the brand saying, what are the objectives? Do they want to activate where they want to maximize sales? Do you want to activate where your competitors are strong? Do you want to activate where you need to increase penetration? Whatever the objectives are, one would do a segmentation accordingly. And based on the segmentation, that gives you the capability to look at very good deployment modeling. When we talk about deployment, the easy thing is I want 50 ambassadors in 50 stores. We can put 50 ambassadors in 50 stores, fixed across full week, and that's how we're going to run. But that's not strategic at all. If one looks at the segmentation analysis, maybe you got your flagship stores. Your top stores, you want to give more support days to. The longer the support you give to the top stores, the better the return on investment, obviously. And as you go down to stores lower on your pyramid, maybe that becomes tactical or becomes to rotational promoters. So there are a lot of different ways to look at how do you deploy, which ultimately gives you a better return, gives you better coverage, and actually for the same budget. Now in Vietnam, we talk about first session and second session. So at every store, promoters will run 2 sessions, the morning session and the afternoon, evening session. Logically, you can get more footfall, better results in the afternoon session. So maybe you shouldn't be running 2 sessions a day. Maybe for the same budget, run the afternoon, evening session where you know you maximize return on investment, double your store coverage, increase your ROI probably by 30% for the same budget. So, deployment model goes across, are you running long-term or short-term? You're running weekday or weekend? Are you going to run brand ambassadors, or you look at a category ambassador or corporate ambassador? There are opportunities to do that, which gives you, again, cost efficiencies. Do you need to develop customized programs by region, by channel, by account? Now, a brand has different challenges versus what the challenge is in Ho Chi Minh versus Hanoi. And you then should be activating accordingly. Now, maybe in Hanoi it's a penetration issue. Sampling comes into play. Remember, to run a sampling program is a lot more expensive than just an educational program. So sample, it's going to add value. But maybe in Ho Chi Minh, you market leader. It's not about penetration. It's not about converting. It's about increasing usage. So maybe what you do is very much a usage campaign driven. So it's really driven through a detailing, interactive, and not sampling. So again, there are a lot of different ways. And ultimately, each one of the formats and the different type of programs that you look at the ROI. Now, traditionally, people will say, as I said, how effective was it? Okay, what's going to give you better performance? A roadshow, an outline roadshow, or a promoter in the store? Okay, guys, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. From an effective perspective, you're going to reach a lot more, you're going to sell a lot more units by running an outline roadshow versus a promoter or ambassador in the store. But that's effectiveness. If you look at it from an efficiency perspective, you may find that roadshow probably cost you 5 times the cost of having the promoter in the store. But does it give you 5 times the rewards? Probably not. Maybe it gives you double the rewards. So all of a sudden, from an efficiency perspective, if the objective is to maximize sales, you'd be far better off running promoters in 5 different stores, giving you probably double the rewards versus one roadshow in one store. It's being clever, and it's looking at people don't normally look at. And the second element we talk about, the art. Yes, guys, creativity, developing unique experiences is critical, and that's always important. But what about the art of execution? Are we profiling correct? Does the promoter or the ambassador reflect the brand? Secondly, what about when it comes to training? I hear a lot of talk about product training. Agencies all talk, yeah, they do a lot of product training. Nobody talks about soft skills training. Are we running soft skills training? Are we teaching promoters and ambassadors how to engage with shoppers and consumers? Very seldom. And that, of course, makes a huge difference from an in-store perspective. Are we developing loyalty programs, retention programs, motivational programs? Are the KPIs all set, detailed, simple, measurable? When it comes to things like quality assurance and safety, that is suddenly never on the agenda. Aren't your agencies or clients talking about safety and quality assurance? But actually, that should be the first thing on the agenda. It's the most important thing, is your safety and your quality assurance. I've been in a lot of stores around Vietnam. I go to Mega Mart in D2, whatever it is, every second weekend. What I've seen happening from a sampling perspective is horrendous. I would not touch anything in those stores. If we look at from a QA perspective, stuff is kept open, it's not safe, and it's so easy to fix that. Aesthetically, it's not good, but these things are happening, and it's not. The issue is when the issue happens, when you have a food poisoning issue, or when you have somebody getting hurt because safety procedures are not in place. That's when there's a huge issue. So one cannot wait until that happens before you try and fix it. Asset management. When I say assets, production of brand activation equipment, roadshow booths and equipment, even from sampling uniforms. If you need to activate roadshows, right, to activate brand activation. The old traditional approach is you brief in a particular job, you design, you produce, you activate traditional materials, largely wooden, and the stuff gets campaigns over. Typically, it lands up in a warehouse or gets thrown away. But I'm saying there's a different way to do it. One should be having a long-term perspective. Spend more money initially, produce assets now with new materials, modular, transformable, sustainable, maybe a shelf life of 2 years. So what net effect is you develop units that can be reutilized from one campaign to another. You can transform it at a minimal cost, transform it to a different brand, to a different category. All of a sudden, you've got a set of assets which look fantastic, better materials, and you can utilize them for a 2-year period. So what does that do? Reduces your asset utilization cost, frees up budget to run more activation days, and that's what one really wants. So it's a matter of saying, what are those areas that we need to consolidate? Sampling. We talk about operational efficiencies. I don't know how many people look at the sampling strategically and say, right, guys, when we're sampling, there's a certain amount of time that a promoter or ambassador is going to have to utilize to do preparation. The longer the preparation time, the less shopper-facing time. The less shopper-facing time, the less sales, the less conversion you're going to get. So it's a matter of saying for any single SOP, have we looked at time and motion studies? Are we maximizing the quantity we can produce? We want to keep the stability of the product right. If you're going to sample, it has to be 100% correct. But again, the whole idea is the bigger you can go, the less times the promoter actually has to do preparation. Less preparation, bigger shopper-facing time. These things aren't looked at strategically. Again, directly impacts on return on investment. And then, if one goes outside of that second element, the third element is really about measurements and data analytics. And that actually governs everything. To start any program, to develop any program, you need those data analytics. To complete a program, to completely learning, you need ongoing data analytics. And not just effectiveness, but look at the ROI measures too. What is working and how do you get it working better? So the objective is to have the right analytics, which are data-led, and there should be ongoing improvement. Don't wait till the end of a campaign to say, right, guys, what is good, what is bad? How do we fix it? This should be done on a weekly basis. So measurements and data becomes absolutely critical. So that's, just a quick overview and very practically of how we would approach and how you can optimize your return on investment. Does that answer your question?
One of the points you made, I mean, I read recently Unilever are breaking down into 5 separate business groups. A lot of plant companies here have separate business units within, and that's where you get these problems of duplication and inefficiencies. But there's one thing that's happening in Vietnam that I think makes this even more important, and that is the retail environment we have here, which is so complex. It reminds me of my time in China. But here, I think the numbers, roughly 70% general trade, provision stores, and that is incredibly challenging to activate effectively and cost efficiently in those environments. But modern trade is very interesting. I used to run Ogilvy Action, which was our shopper marketing business in China. And modern trade, was a rapidly growing segment, less so here. But what's interesting, there's one trend in modern trade, and that's the move to clean. And if you don't know what that is, remember tobacco marketing suddenly disappeared overnight. TV advertising was banned, then all advertising, eventually point of sale, then suddenly the point of sale disappeared from all stores, and cigarettes are now sold behind a grey screen. Thailand went dark overnight, literally. And what we're seeing in Vietnam is modern trade going clean. And what that means is, chains like Hong Kong and others don't want all that mess from brands in their stores. They don't want all of the shelf wobblers and all of that. And they're now having very clean environment whereby a much more pleasant shopping experience. I'd urge you to go to Hong Kong in Saigon Pearl, and have a look at that store. That's, I think, a good indication of how modern trade retail is heading. But in that context, we used to talk about a 4-step path to purchase inside the store. That's gone. So it's becoming much more challenging to effectively activate in retail. There's a critical need now, as you lose that in-store path to purchase, to integrate digital within that. And there are some other trends that are coming in retail. Phil, I don't know if you want to touch on these in a moment, but what's happening with e-commerce, it's still, I remember, Avik, when we were talking about marketplaces. Kotex, for instance, your sales within e-commerce channels, maybe not more than 5%, but still a very important channel for you. When you go onto marketplaces, we heard, I was with Grab yesterday, they were talking about the average person on Grab will spend 70 minutes browsing before they buy something. The amount of time people are spending on marketplaces is huge. And unless you're having a presence there, you're not going to start winning share of mind. So looking at marketplaces, not just as a sales channel, but as a channel to win share of mind is equally important. Phil,
well, just to build on what you said, that just interpreting what I think you're saying is that, doesn't it mean that it's even more important to make sure that in store, whether it's online or actual physical, that your brand is easy to find, and also that your packaging really stands out on shelf, because those are things that aren't going to change even with clean retail. Yeah. And I think subjectively, when I think about some of my clients, they've not always paid enough attention to those elements. That it's more about, right, we've got this really fancy campaign, it's very, very interactive, but make sure that when a consumer wants to buy something, it's actually easy for them to find and easy for them to buy. It's just a very basic thing that sometimes is a little bit underlooked, I think.
Yeah. And I think another thing to think about is in store, you're not looking at changing consumer perceptions and beliefs, which is what most advertising attempts to do. You're looking at changing a specific shopper behavior. You're looking to nudge them along to make that purchase. So the mindset needs to be different. And this is where behavioral science, I think, can help a lot, is understanding how do you frame in-store messaging such that it drives the behavior that you're looking for. you want to chip in here and talk a little bit about your experience in store? I mean, we've recently been through an exercise with Huggies, but a point perhaps for you to comment on would be this. Packaging design is often developed on a computer screen. I would argue you have to look at packaging design in the context of where it sits on that shopper path to purchase. And that does influence design slightly differently. The other thing I would encourage us to all understand is that people shop categories differently. So when I buy diapers, the first thing I look for is size. When I'm buying infant milk formula, I don't buy diapers for myself.
Why are you buying
but
diapers?
you know what I mean.
Adult diapers.
Adult
right?
diapers. Adult diapers, I'm large.
Do you make those, have you?
Yeah.
We'll try.
But really understanding the shopper path to purchase is different in a wet market, in a provision store, in a CVS, in a mini, in a hyper. Also, the purchase decision tree is different by category. And these, by understanding these things, this is how we make our below-the-line marketing more effective. How are you feeling about that approach with your brands?
I think some things you guys said, right? As modern trade moves towards more cleaner shelves, primarily a majority of the interventions are in digitization. So how do we, in effect, tap into the consumer journey much earlier, effectively start talking to them even before they enter the store, nudge them inside the store digitally, not just physically. There is still the room physically, as Phil said, on the primary shelf. So the primary shelf still exists, your packaging still exists. A lot of the secondary shelf is going to go away, but primary shelf and the interventions you had on the primary shelf will stay. So those continue, and your focus on those elements which still are there on the primary shelf, it'll become more important. And then digitization has a lot of impact as to what you're doing with the retailer. Typically in categories like baby diapers and all, obviously the retail environment is a little more developed, and there are a lot of activities that we tend to do with the retailer. And how do you drive loyalty? How do you keep engaging with the consumer even post-purchase? So yeah, I think completely echo with what you're saying. There is a movement in trade, but each category with its different dynamics will play out differently. I think a lot of what we are doing is more banking on digitization and how do we get into the consumer life cycle and talk to each consumer even before they get into store and after they have moved out of the store.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would urge all of you to do is to really think about the path to purchase in your category by the different types of channel. In a provision store, the path to purchase is probably curbside pickup. You pull up on your scooter, you ask the lady who's got the store, can you get me a Huggies? And she'll hand it to you. You don't actually go inside the store. So all of that point of sale that we put in there, perhaps wasted. How do you shop convenience? How do you shop hyper? How do you shop mini-mart? That's one thing. Understanding the category decision tree that you have. Then also understanding the online path to purchase. So I did a lot of work with KFC and Pizza Hut, and they used to think that they were brilliant. So they were the first really to get into sort of food delivery and online. But I would urge you to do a safari, a guided safari. Get a group of you together and go through the customer journey. Try and find your brand. Then try and order. So we did this with KFC. Want to buy KFC for lunch? Where do we find the KFC? You find it, you go online. You then want to order. KFC had 48 combo meals available for lunch. Far too much choice. How on earth are you going to choose? And as you go through that journey, you see all of the problems, all of the friction points that we are putting in front of consumers. So it's too difficult to choose what to buy. Having chosen what to buy, you're going to pay for it. They didn't take credit cards. How crazy is that? Then, having paid for it, how do you track the delivery? When you've got it, etc., etc. If you can understand your shopper path to purchase and remove all of the pain points in that path to purchase, what will happen is sales will go through the roof. Because what happens then is residual marketing investment kicks in having removed all the barriers, you get growth free. So if I had $100 on marketing, I would spend the first part of that on removing any friction in that path to purchase before investing more money on marketing support. Now, have we run over? I don't know if we have, looking at timekeeping. Questions from the audience? Can we have a runner with a mic? Microphone? It's coming. All right, I'll go over there.
That's all right.
Okay.
Hi, this is Sumit. My question is very simple. I think I understand that we all understand that what are the key ingredients for success. I think all of the speakers spoke about what are the things that should be looked into. One of the point which has also came out that some of the cases, the investments are made based on certain past experience or a bit of a gut. That is where the money. But today, at the same breath, we are saying money is becoming more expensive. Like today, whatever we buy, whatever be it in on ATL or BTL, everything is becoming more and more expensive. And if the topic, as we're saying, optimizing marketing ROI, if we keep on investing and then trying on a larger scale, then there is always a bit of a success versus a failure, this kind of a trade-off exists, which we have not been able to minimize. The question is, therefore, the whole path, today the importance is to preempt with the real-time data and setting up a measurement metric as to right from the seeing an ad till going to the store and buying it in the entire path to purchase. And that behavioral insight can only help me to fit back the entire marketing system, engineer the entire marketing system to drive a better ROI. So with a small amount of money that we spend for this, I can get a better amount of ROI. But we do not see that's happening. Or is it happening? I don't know. To what percentage? A question to all of you, and particularly Avik, I'm asking you as a brand, as a marketing person, that what percentage of your budget that you may be deciding that I'll be spending $10 million on a brand X, and that $10 million you will be primarily spending on a certain understanding of yours. But at the end of the day, what are the milestones that you are setting? What are the simulations that you are investing on? And the question to you from the counter point of view, what are the new measurement metric that you are setting up for this process? Where is those actions? Where is and how much is happening? I don't know. And this is, I think, is the biggest question today, because as very rightly said, the digitization has happened, offline to online to offline. These are multiple dynamics and complexities crept in. So how we are taking up that challenge and getting us ready for that? I think it's a long one, but I had to set the context, otherwise I won't be able to explain this. Sorry for being a bit long. Thank you. Please.
Is everybody looking at me?
We're looking at you,
Yeah,
Phil.
okay, yeah. It was a very, is it Sumit, your name, sorry? Sumit, yeah, okay. A good question. I felt, maybe I didn't explain it well, I felt that earlier on I kind of got across my answer to that, but maybe I'll just hopefully not repeat myself too much. But so yeah, the world is extremely complicated. One of the issues is that there's almost too much data. Like, so many things are measurable now, but it all exists in silos. They're all in different departments, and it's almost, I won't say impossible, but let's say it's a very challenging task to try and put it all together and work out what it actually means. So I think that's a big challenge that everybody has at the moment. Just bring in Avik for a second. So I think he also made the point that he's got his data, but he doesn't use it to just make the decisions for him. He uses what he's got, but as a very experienced marketeer, his gut sense, his feel of the market is also extremely important. So I'll just make the point that like data, ROI, and analytics are not going to give you everything. It gives you guidance, but you still need to make a decision yourself based on what you have. So there's still that level of subjectivity involved in it. Having said that, I think the approach that I mentioned earlier, which is general term holistic marketing measurement, I think this is the new thing within analytics, within marketing analytics, which kind of gets close to that. You know, it's able to deal with as much data as a client has available that feeds into the system. And even when they don't have the data themselves, there's the whole new thing, this whole area that is the big thing at the moment of AI, which can also bring in some extrapolations where the data doesn't actually exist itself. The other thing as well that is crucially important, as everybody knows, is the importance of the brand, right? You know, measuring the importance of the brand is not that easy. But you know, within my company, we do this analytic every year, and we've done it for about the last 30 years, which is basically the world's top 100 most valuable brands. And we do this piece of analysis every year, and we benchmark the top 10 brands globally in terms of the valuation of them. Brands such as Apple, Google, Microsoft, Coke, they're usually high up this. And what we find is that even in times of recession, the valuation of the companies that own these brands significantly outperforms the stock markets, all of the global indices. So the strength of the brand in consumers' mind is absolutely crucial to getting a strong ROI. And when you're bringing this into the analytics, if you've got some kind of measurement of brand health, some brand health data, that's also extremely important to be able to put into the model. So just to summarize, I think the answer is it's new. It's called holistic marketing measurement. You might see it under different names. Even with my company, I've got all kinds of jargon for it, which I won't go into. But it's a relative new area, and it's based on probabilities, and it's utilizing the new technologies such as AI.
Rohit, thank you.
Thank you.
Did that sufficiently? Yeah. What? I mean, I think what you're talking about is the holy grail, which is total marketing modeling. And yes, it will give companies huge competitive advantage. I mean, you're looking at this, Avik, without giving anything away. I mean, other clients are looking at it, but whoever gets there first will have real advantage. Take my mic. If you want the mic.
No, I just see. I think the ideal case scenario or the utopia is that you have real-time data, and you can almost on every campaign and every day you can say that what works better and how do I optimize. The reality is that the business and the trade is a little more complex than than this. You cannot have real-time analysis of every data or every data point or every input that you're giving you don't get, because obviously the trade situation is complex. Second, the feedback loop is different for different kinds of businesses, right? So it's not that the feedback loop is equal, like Phil said, when the input and if the entire path to purchase happens online, obviously you can move towards multi-attribution modeling and start trying to get into more real-time analysis. But as it moves across different channels, the feedback loops are at different frequencies. So you need to factor in. That's the only thing I can say. Obviously, companies are moving to expedite the process as much as possible. There are companies who are in-housing a lot of these services to try to be able to move faster. But are we at a situation where we can, on a daily basis, give an input and say, you know what, for 100% of my business, I know what to do better? I don't think so. There are pockets within the business where you will know what to do because you have the entire loop running online, or you have real-time access to data. But today, obviously, we're not in a situation where 100% of my business has the same feedback loop. It doesn't have.
There's another aspect to this. I call that top-down ROI. Bottom up. The lady from Pharma City this morning. You imagine if you could aggregate all of the data that is available from your ex-factory sales, your sales data, your data from key accounts, wholesalers, sub-wholesalers, whatever you can get hold of, and then you start overlaying onto that other data sets, as the Pharma City lady this morning was suggesting. You end up with a map of Vietnam, understanding every single trade zone. And I think the holy grail is understanding the trade zones you want distribution in, which brands you want to activate in those trade zones, and within those trade zones, which channels are important. And it will be different. The problem with marketing at the moment is it's one size fits all. Let's go with this key account nationally, and it's desperately inefficient. So from a communications perspective, yes, but from a sales, distribution, brand activation, you've got data is the key. Data by trade zone, then you can start doing segmentation, then you can do deployment modeling on marketing investment, on sales force activity, on promoter activity, on sampling, on point of sale, on promotion. Which trade zone has more people who are gluten intolerant? That data is available. So I think it's got to be bottom up as well as top down. Rohit.
So I have a question. I had asked the audience to challenge you guys, but I guess I'll do the first one. And coming not from MMA, but as Rohit, as an individual, it seems like we all are like children in the candy store. A child wants one chocolate. If mom says yes, he wants another one. If she says yes, he wants another one. My point is, when is enough for marketing ROI justification? 50 years back, 70 years back, you had reach on print. Nobody knew what the hell the consumer was reading. It was one thing, published number of print newspaper that went out. One number. We went from there to TV. There was one number, total reach. Are we just complicating it more and more by getting more deeper into it? Isn't there a simpler version or a simpler narrative as to what should marketing or ROI mean? To me, marketing ROI, for example, is business growth. Whatever aids that business growth, PTL, ATL, etc., at the end of the day, if it is a sales number aided with brand awareness, let's say I'm just going back 30 years before digital happened. Those two numbers defined growth, defined stock price movement. Why is it that we all, in bits and pieces, are looking at more and more and more and more, and a fractional data here and a fractional data here and isn't that more complicating? And then to Lester's point, one agency, you spoke about doing one agency. Yes, there is a risk of doing that. But what is the narrative of doing the work with the agency? If the agency can help you grow your business, that justifies having one agency. If you put your eggs in a basket and you can grow, then can the marketeers possibly give a percentage of the share of the growth to the agency because they are now part of the growth strategy? Now, these two are linked, they are not separate, but at the same time, why Why can it not be simple?
I wish it could be. I
No,
mean,
but it's for us as a narrative. If we are sitting here in this room, can we try and simplify it rather than not? Is the question I'm making.
Rohit, you're right. In fact, we had that conversation earlier because this whole area of ROI, it's bloody complicated. And, one of the asks I had of Phil, let's try and simplify it as much as we can, but you can't. There's such an explosion now of data that's available that it is complex. You need companies like Kantar to help you navigate through that. But I wish we could make it more simpler, Rohit, but it's not.
Isn't the sales growth number the number one should be? I'm not trying to
No, it's what's the cost
fight
of
the
getting
thing,
those.
really open a fight.
It's the cost of getting those sales. That you see, with zero-based budgeting, CMOs have got to be justifying their budget every time. And it's the cost of that market share, it's the cost of those sales that is increasingly under scrutiny. That's the challenge. Any other?
How much of the budget to spend on the marketing budget goes behind understanding the behavioral ecosystem and the insight of the consumer? Because we have a lot of targeting fancy about, looking at the city, lifestyle, things and that. There is so many secondary and tertiary variables that we look at to come to the core variable. But to put some effort and put some initiative to measure the core variable, I think that very rightly that sales or no sales, either that consumer is buying or not buying. It's a kind of binary. If you look at it, it's a binary. Either they're buying or not buying. If somebody is buying, please buy. If somebody is not buying, why that person is not buying? If we can get to understand this, at least we can keep improving everything. I think there is no final kind of prescriptive strategy available on our, which can be forever be applicable. Right? We all agree. But at least to move in the right direction towards optimizing, as we say that optimize. We are saying optimizing in the process. I think that area, are we really spending any money? Are we really spending any intelligence or any industry efforts or the expertise, anything we are doing? I know the attribution and all these things because something measuring to some one kind of a research by that thing, another is measured by another kind of a research, no single source measurement. So until unless you have them all together, it's apple versus orange versus guava. That is what is happening. So finally, we never be able to come to a kind of an answer which can be bit of a stable answer, I can say. I think may not be foolproof, but stable. So at least to move towards that, what initiatives, financially, as the intellectually, this industry is moving, or there is any, I don't think it's not a huge money always in these things, but is there that understanding that consciously, I'm just asking, I'm trying to understand, that is that happening? How much that is happening? Both from the marketing point of view, measurement point of view, research point of view, or maybe as you said, that all the theories and the understanding that we are kind of embracing, that we know these are the couple of things that can bring a better success. At the end of the day, this is very simple. Either someone is buying or not buying. If they buy, why they are buying? If they don't buy, who is not buying and why not? So this entire measurement, is there anything?
Well, I suspect not as much as there should be. Phil, perhaps you can talk. I think you're getting a lot of inquiries in this area at the moment, but
Well,
historically.
Yeah, well, the world is an incredibly complicated place these days with the fragmentation of media, and it's changing continuously. So it's a massive challenge. But just going back to what Rohit said, that yeah, the KPI is sales growth, but the clients want to understand about, well, what should I invest in? I'm sure they won't be happy just throwing loads of money at something that they've got no idea whether it's working or not. And then they got sales growth, but they got no idea what's caused that sales growth. So I think my answer to that is that's not what the KPI should be. Like yeah, okay, it's the end result, but clients need an understanding of what's working, what's contributing to sale, and what's not. So to answer your question, that there is no simple way of understanding exactly what's working or what's not. I mean, I've been involved in some experiments with at least one platform owner, whereby one thing you can't do, you can't ask a consumer, right, you just bought that, why did you buy it, or what influenced you? Because they don't know, and if you force them to tell you, they'll just make up rubbish. Anything which is recall based just doesn't work, because the human brain doesn't work like that. So one way you can get at it potentially, but again, this has got issues to do with data privacy, is that because everybody's got mobile devices these days, you can have an app which monitors what people are doing, what they're interacting with. Obviously, you need to get their consent for them to install that. It can be very, very expensive. You can also incorporate some kind of app, such as something like Shazam, whereby you've got a creative that's got obviously a particular audio, and therefore you know that they're exposed to that creative, they've been exposed to it. It can work obviously offline. It can work in, say, traditional medias, or anything where there's a voice on where there's audio online as well. But again, it doesn't pick up everything. It's also very, very expensive. So I think, to give you an answer, there's no perfect solution to it, and the world is getting even more complicated. But our advertisers need data to be able to make decisions, even if it's not the full data. But we shouldn't just rely on the data alone. That, you know, marketeers are paid because they've got good an intuitive sense about what works and what doesn't work. So they've still got to tap into that, even without the perfect data.
Okay. Any question over here? Could we have a mic? Thank you.
Hi. First of all, thank you for sharing your knowledge. I think all of this is very relevant. I want to ask to touch on one point that Lester mentioned about the Center of Excellence. Maybe you can share more your experience on, or maybe a real case about how we set up that in a large organization, overcoming the organizational resistance, and then making it as a catalyst to all of the good method, all of the data and system investment that a company make to be in effect and to be sustainable. So we like to hear maybe some your experience, or maybe some company that you have supported on that.
Good, thank you. Well, first of all, I'll give you an example from Nestlé Malaysia. When Nestlé Malaysia developed what they call the SCED department, which is the Shopper and Consumer Engagement. So there's a department which is dedicated, you can call it an internal agency in a way. This department really, the clients were all the different BUs. And this department developed the expertise and the skills to manage brand activation and manage on behalf of all the BUs. So they were hugely capable, all the competencies, and they in turn managed all the briefs, managed all the agencies, managed the research, managed the recommendations. So it became really, that's why we call it a Center of Excellence. Right now, if you look at Nestlé Vietnam, Nestlé Vietnam do have a department already, which again is acting across all the BUs. But again, the areas where they need to actually become more competent. So I would not call them today a Center of Excellence, but they got the opportunity to do that. Obviously, I think it's also got to do with size and scale. If you're talking about big FMCG corporations like Nestlé's or like the Unilevers, they can afford to actually put that type of structure in place. Now, if you're talking about a smaller organization with limited number of brands, it's going to be difficult to achieve. But if you do get it right, it really does make a difference. And I'll just take that further. And nothing against the activation agencies, but I just don't see, and across the region, I don't see brand activation agencies themselves adding value. I don't see brand activation agencies coming to clients and saying, look guys, this isn't working, or we've done an ROI analysis on this. I think we need to change this. It's kind of a master-slave relationship. You know, the client says, I want 50 promoters in 50 stores. The agency activates 50 promoters in 50 stores. And they look at the end of the program, they say, oh, well, what is good, what is bad? But if you're going to create your own internal center of excellence, they in turn start driving that. And they start driving their agencies. Because I don't believe it'll be easy to get the agencies to add value. I think it's client who have to create that. And they have to actually dictate that to the agencies. But ultimately, it has a huge difference on return on investment. Does that answer your question?
Okay, Rohit, I think we are able to break early. Are we? Are we?
Gone for an hour.
We've gone for an hour. We've gone over our allotted 20 minutes. That's all we were given initially. So if there aren't any more questions, I'd like to thank our panel. Thank you, Lester. Thank you, Avik. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Rohit. Let you wrap up.
Thank you, guys.